For 2 years, Gaza has been at the center of one of the most devastating conflicts of the 21st century. What began on October 7, 2023, with a surprise attack by Hamas, spiraled into months of unrelenting violence. More than 67,000 Palestinians and over 2,000 Israelis are reported to have lost their lives. Cities have turned into rubble, families displaced, and the region's humanitarian crisis has reached a breaking point. Across the world, images of destruction and grief have stirred anger, sorrow, and urgent calls for peace. After several failed ceasefires, a new Trump-brokered peace plan has emerged. One that promises a lasting truce, the release of hostages, and a first Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. But as headlines declare the war is over, the question remains, is it truly over? In this exclusive interview, Israel's ambassador to Rwanda, Einet Weiss, reflects on the ceasefire, the peace plan, and what the future holds for both Israelis and Palestinians. So, Madam Ambassador, thank you for creating time to talk to us.
Yes, thank you.
I'll start with a deeply personal question. On October 10th of 2023, you posted a deeply emotional photo on your X account when your husband was going back home to serve as a reservist. Looking back at that moment, how would you describe the weight of that moment today? And also beyond your duties as the ambassador to Rwanda, how does the knowledge of a member of your family serving on the front lines, and of course you wished him well, and others, how does it shape your perspective about this conflict?
Good morning, Madam Wycliffe. Very nice to meet you. And it's an honor to have Iggy here again. It's a very successful media house, and I wish you continuation of good luck with your job. So back to your question. Wow. First of all, people forget sometimes that ambassadors are just human beings. And I started my tenureship here 50 days before the war had started in Israel. And it was a very, very hard and dark moment for me and the whole country, of course, and diaspora and diplomats and everyone who belongs to Israel. When October 7 happened, it was so traumatic. But the one thing, and that's the uniqueness of Israel, and it's very common to Rwanda as well, is the deep patriotism. And my husband didn't have to go, but it was almost a factual thing for him. He knew he had to go because he knew everyone on between October 7 and the days that followed, everyone who could volunteered. We had hundreds of thousands. We had literally a train of planes coming to Israel with people who just dropped their jobs and came to volunteer to the army, any age, from 25 in reserves all the way to 60. People who were very long followed before that came back. So when he decided to come back, it was not a question, but it was very emotional. We didn't know what's going on. We didn't know how big the drama on the ground. We didn't know which turn it's going to take. All we knew was that 1,500 people were murdered. We knew the hostages were taken captive. We knew missiles were zooming all over the country. And we knew that the country is in its maybe moment of insecurity as a country. So he came, it was very emotional. He went 4 times since then. So he went back and forth. And I think that really shows you the nature. For me, it was a very difficult moment because I was just starting my mission. I'm a human being.
Yeah.
My country is going to, my parents are in shelter, my family is in shelter. No one knows what's going on. And I only started here. So it was a very emotional moment, but it was also a very strong moment of when you know what's the right thing to do.
Great. And is he still serving on the front lines?
Yeah, he's serving now on the front lines. He served until recently in Southern Command, so it's helping the front line. So he's, until recently.
See. Now, moving swiftly to the latest development from Hamas and Israel. Today, as we speak, there is an exchange of prisoners or detainees going on. Please provide us with a current update on that.
So maybe I should start with that, because this interview is happening in the most optimistic and happiest day we've experienced in the last 2 years. It's a long time in the history of a country. I mean, maybe not in the large history, but for a country that is 76 years old, to have 2 years of constant war is very, very tiresome. And this is the moment of light in our history. We have all 20 hostages coming back, 20 that we know of, they're coming alive from Gaza. As we speak, all of them crossed the border, or they are in the hands of the Red Cross, which means they're no longer in captive, they're no longer hostages. So it's a very happy moment. Just a day ago, a couple of days ago, we had 500,000, 500,000 people. For a country in the size of Israel, which is 9 million people, 500,000 were marching in what we call the Hostages Square, celebrating the agreement. So they crossed right now. We still don't know what condition. Of course, the physical one is easier, and the emotional one will be months before we understand how traumatized they are, but at least they're back to the families, or on the way back to the families.
As you said, there's a gray of hope that everybody who has been following this conflict is seeing. And this is partly or largely because of the deal brokered by the President Trump and other partners that are interested in to see that this war comes to an end. So how is this Trump brokered agreement different from what we have seen in the past, where there's a ceasefire, but a few days later, it is no longer, it doesn't hold. So how is this one different?
I think the difference is the timing and the agreement content itself. So if you followed, it's kind of a very simple in 20 points. When I learned international studies, we learned that the longer the agreement is, the less safer it is. When you have 20 points, but they're solving the concerns of Israel, then it's the best 20 points you can have. What has changed, I would say, are two things. First of all, Hamas is tired. In that way, we've achieved our goals. We have dramatically reached out to the heads of the organization. For 2 years, we're going after every arm of the organization. It's a defeated, in a way, organization. It's tired. It's seeking for a way out of the situation. So the timing of 2 years of war definitely has its own significant relevance to this. But also, I think the points are safeguarding, or the agreement is safeguarding the security of Israel. And if you go through the 20 points and you see that the essence of it is that the agreement, or at least that's the goal of the agreement, is to demilitarize Hamas and create the safe zone for Israel's existence, or the normal life of Israel. This agreement solves it. And I think that was the first time that also Hamas agreed to take this. Also, what's different is that there is a very strong, I would say, American safeguards to this agreement, and as you said, a personal safety that the President Trump is giving. And that is something, again, when he was pushing personally, and the agreement was, and he was applying a lot of pressure also on all sides, that gives another level of assurance that what's in the agreement will happen. And I think until that point, all ceasefires were either not completely followed by Hamas, or they have not given the right elements of safety to Israel. And that one is quite different.
Yeah. Talking about the ceasefire, early this year, the January ceasefire, it is alleged that it's Israel that actually didn't hold to it.
Again, can you repeat the question?
I'm saying the ceasefire in January
2025.
2025, it is said that it's Israel that actually violated that ceasefire through firing missiles to.
So what happened really in previous ceasefires, and again, this is part of the problem, was that either Hamas did not hold his or did not release the hostages or continued his activities or shot on soldiers or shot on Israel. And I think when you have a ceasefire that is not really followed thoroughly, and basically, maybe to take it one step forward, the whole fighting, the reason why Israel is there to begin with is the fact we're dealing with, it's an asymmetric war, and we're dealing with a very vicious terror organization. The whole idea of the fight and the reason why there were so many attempts is because eventually Israel cannot allow itself to either end the war without making sure that this doesn't happen again. And so every time there was attempt to either violate, put pressure on soldiers, put pressure on hostages, continue any kind of terror activity, this is something we cannot afford ourselves. So every time you've seen it in the past, I think you need a candid realization that the activity of terror organization cannot continue, and that the border needs to be secured.
And and clearly everything is moving so fast. And when I was watching Trump this morning, he said the war is over. Is it?
That's the whole idea of this peace agreement. The war, Israel is withdrawing its troops, and the war is officially over. And this is true. I think with the agreements, we need to make sure that Hamas sticks to the points of the agreement. Israel has so far done as we agreed upon, and Israeli military is withdrawing. From our point of view, the war is over, but there is still a big chunk that needs to follow and is very critical. And there are two critical points in the agreements that are stressing this out. The first one, we do need, again, as I said, to see a safeguard for Israel by demilitarizing Hamas and making sure that he surrenders the weapons. The second stage, as mentioned, is also that the tunnels, many people don't know, and they're very quick to judge, that in Gaza, the length of the tunnels is roughly 600 kilometers, which is, I would say, it's more than Gaza itself. It's like a snake shape, and it's very big and very wide. In order to make this war really over, it's part of the agreement is to make sure that the tunnels are being addressed as well, that the weapons are out, that the Hamas terrorists are given away the ply to destroy Israel. So these elements have to follow, as Israel's elements have to follow too.
Yeah, sure. So you briefly mentioned the 20-point plan, briefly, but I would want you now to talk about it more broadly. How does Israel view this proposal, particularly clauses regarding demilitarization, transitional governance, and conditional pathway to the Palestinian statehood?
It's something we're being asked a lot, and I think that's a critical element. And also through the war itself, Israel never wished to or looked to take control over Gaza. The aim of the goals of the war were very, very clear and stated. First was to release the hostages, which is happening today. Also, bodies of hostages, not only alive, but also dead hostages, because we value lives, and all Israelis that are there are valued, even if they're no longer alive. alive. Sorry. Second element, as you mentioned, and it's very critical, that was part of the goals, stated goals, is to demilitarize and weaken Hamas. Hamas, just to remind you, when Israel withdrew in 2006 from the Gaza Strip, and again, people tend to forget it, withdrew completely, every village, every soldier. Hamas took over in a coup. It was non-elected. We gave it to the PLO, and it was taken over by Hamas. And Hamas stated as a terror organization the destruction of the state of Israel. I think that goal as part of the war was to make sure that Hamas is no longer leading and governing Gaza, because it was not a beginning. He was not legitimately chosen, but secondly, after that he was, but secondly, it's a stated international terror organization. And it's impossible to broker deal or negotiate with a terror organization. So I think what this 20 points agreement is very, very elaborative talking about is, yes, as I mentioned and I said before, demilitarizing, but also there's a whole process of governance. So the point 9, I think it's a very elaborative point of the agreement, is talking about a transitional government. And that will be a technocrat government, apolitical technocrat government. And I think also monitored by the international community, led by the US. I think this solution is for the first time that we see an agreement that really addresses the need to make these areas governed, or Gaza governed, not by Hamas or any other terror organization that clears or states that it wants to destroy Israel, but by a governance that wants to develop Gaza. So like any other entity in the world, it should instead of taking the money and put it into tunnels and weapons, it should be investing in its own people. And if you look at the 20 points agreement, what I like about it, that it has many points that talk about how it's going to reconstruct Gaza, how we're going to make the economic zone, or how you're going to bring more investment into. And that was, by the way, what happened before October 7, because Gaza was experiencing a rise, economically boom of economic investment. There were many people, the highest amount of Gazans who were working in Israel got permissions. So I think the idea is you're going to get the money to reconstruct Gaza, but it can no longer go to tunnels, weapons, Hamas. It needs to go to the people of Gaza. And that is something the agreement really addresses.
And also, you talked about the withdrawal. Is there like a timeline you could mention that you are aware of?
If you've seen already, a lot of Israel is withdrawing. Israeli IDF is on the process of withdrawing, started upon even before the release of the hostages. So the process is going on. I think if you see again in the agreement, there are a few points, and they're going to be construction of an international monitoring body that will work with IDF to the point of the agreement of withdrawal. And that's a process that's going on. Of course, we need to see also that Hamas is following his parts. As you've seen already, another thing that is happening is Israel releasing terrorists as part of the agreement, and some of them with blood on their hands, as we call it, which means that they killed people. And they were sentenced for life, and they are being released as part of the agreement and the good, as we call it, the good faith. I think all the elements are going in par with the timeline that was so far that was considered in this agreement.
Okay. And also talking about the issue that is everybody is talking about is the impact of this war. It has been, no doubt, devastating, both to Hamas and Gaza Strip, and also back at home in Israel. So as this war, as you said, nears its completion or comes to an end, if at all everything is followed to the latter, there have been claims of, a genocide in Gaza. how will Israel now be accountable for the things that the country is said to have done in Gaza?
I think this is a very important and deep issue because all through this couple of years, and even before Israel went into Gaza, so we're talking the genocide against Israelis and the massacre happened on October 7. IDF went only days later, started its operation in Gaza, and even before, there were already voices calling, to free, whatever, clear Israel, river to the sea, all kind of calls, rise in anti-Semitism. That was even before Israel went. I think my problem with the statements of genocide and genocide, the first one, of course, it's false. And the misunderstanding of what really was going on there, which is you have a territory that is governed by a internationally declared, recognized terror organization. On October 7, went into Israel. On October 6, there was peace. Those who created the mass were Hamas that, in a very genocidal act, went into villages, shot and raped and murdered families and burned them and destroyed homes and killed in the most inhumane way people, 1,500 of them, including in a very peaceful festival, Nova Festival, which a lot of the hostages that are released today were part of the festival. Then they go back home with the hostages and start to operate from homes. Hamas not only did he operate from hospitals and homes and use their own human shield, he was not accountable for that, but also along these 2 years, every time there was a huge attempt by Israel to clear civilized areas or to clear populated area to other places, he threatened, he killed, and he harmed these people because he wanted them to stay there. The main reason why you see many of these results is because you have an entity, which again is a non-state entity, is a terror organization that overtly taking his own people as human shields, which means that if Israel operates against Hamas, they put them in the front line. And if there is missiles attack against Israel, it's being done from children's bedrooms, under beds. Why? Because they want the world to then criticize Israel when we retaliate. I think the basic problem was that Israel was not given the same rights that other countries are given to retaliate, to protect its border, to go after its own hostages, and to weaken the terror organization. The third or the fourth element is, of course, the impartiality or the way Israel is treated differently than any other country in the world, because you don't see the same claims when it comes to many other wars or any other disputes or any in the international community. You don't see quarter of the criticism. You don't see the same way of international behavior through, I would call it international institutions or international judicial institutions that Israel receives. So the impartiality of what Israel is going through was striking. And the fifth is that you never seen a call of any kind towards what Israel was going through in the last 2 years, including now, even a week ago, 4 days ago, where missiles are being shot at Israel from Yemen, which is almost 2,000 kilometers away, and people, almost 3-4 million people, have to go to shelters. And it's not also taking into account the fact that Hamas, a lot of the reasons of what you've seen there is, again, because for many years, from 2006, Hamas was failing his own people by not creating enough shelters, enough security, enough food, enough anything. And even along these 2 years, when Israel is the sole provider of humanitarian assistance, it was looted again and again by Hamas itself. So, the problem was not the call for proportionality or the discussion about it, which is legitimate. It was accusation that was not followed by what was going on the ground itself. And it raised many questions, about the fact that Israel is being criticized completely different than other countries in the world are being criticized.
And still on that point, the figures that human rights organizations, they are placing the figures at over 60,000. Half of that children, women. I understand Israel has one of the best intelligence systems in the world. Say in Gaza, for example, when the government says that Hamas has been using civilians as human shields. I think there is a way that, you can't just go ahead to bomb an area where there are civilians. So how does your government respond to such serious accusations?
That's another thing. First, I start with the beginning. No children should die in a war. Wars are bad.
Yeah.
And no women should die in a war. And I'm a mother. Okay? This war should have never been happening to begin with. My problem is the fact that, again, international community forgets that we didn't choose to begin this war, okay? And so that is first one. The second one is the figures sometimes are coming out mainly, again, from Hamas hands are not necessarily accurate. It doesn't mean that there are no casualties from civilians. I'm just saying that sometimes figures can be skewed by the same organization. And the third element is I am sure, and I want to be, and I believe in it, we're doing whatever we can to minimize. Gaza Strip is a very small, heavily populated area. I know for a fact that during this war, we've tried as much as we can to clear and send message to population to clear from areas that are going to be bombed. We've done whatever we can. What we know that in many, many cases, this area was then taken by Hamas and blocked, or that people were not allowed to leave these areas. I can also tell you that we have done whatever we could, more than any other army, including modern wars that took many more casualties than this. We tried to warn by pamphlet, by people going, by actually risking our own soldiers, and many times not bombing areas that were actually clearly sending missiles from these areas to Israel. We chose not to do things because they were populated. I can tell you also that many Israeli soldiers, I know that part of the international Vienna Convention and the international treaties are not looking at soldiers, but many soldiers were killed because we chose to send them by foot and not doing operation from air. The toll on the Israeli side is immense. We've never, per capita, I would say, lost so many soldiers. And part of the reason is because we chose to risk their lives over civilians. Is it the best result? No, war should not happen. But again, any country in the world would have done what it can to try and find a way to protect. And protecting, part of it is also making sure that areas with missiles are being cleared. And some operations, you have to operate heavily. Were the mistakes being done? For sure. It's a war. But I can tell you one thing, and I think I'm very, again, confident about it. If there's one thing I know about my country and the IDF, if things were happen, they're in a minute being taken into either, of course, heavy investigation or judicial or investigation or looked into it, and lessons were taken into consideration even as we were fighting. So again, it's easy to blame Israel and not to talk about all the measures we have done, but also very important to understand that many people who call Israel many kind of names, don't even know which part of the world it is, where it is, the history of this long-going dispute, and what happened in these 2 years. That's something that is very important to stress when we talk about this.
Yeah. And also, as in this phase of the conflict where we are in, there are growing calls for independent investigations into what Hamas has done and also what the Israeli forces have done to ensure that both parties comply to the international laws. So what is Israel's position on
First of all,
this?
it bothers me by the question itself bothers me because you equate, the nature of this question equates between a terror organization that calls itself a terror organization, they're not even hiding it, and between a state. There's no equation. Now, I really hope I'm wrong, but the world is moving into asymmetric wars. And you will see many countries that have to deal with international recognized terror organizations. Actually, if you see the coalitions of countries that just fought 10 years ago against ISIS, or if you've seen the U.S. fighting against in Afghanistan, this was a warfare that was asymmetric by nature because you're dealing with a terror organization. Now, terror organization does not bind by international law in the definition. They do not respect international law. All they want to do is murder. Now, they don't even, are not shy to say it. If you look at interviews of Hamas leaders, they say, if we can do it again, we'll do it again. We'll kill, we'll burn, we'll worry, but we don't care about international law. And then you equate it with a country that is not perfect and making mistakes, again, in a wartime, in the most impossible environment, that has a very robust judicial capabilities, that have a very robust judicial organ in the IDF. And so the question itself is very wrong. We are not the same. What Hamas needs to undergo through is a very different thing than Israel. The second point is, and we've said it many, many times, this calls for international, even by international law itself. If you look at it, it states that a country that has the capability to investigate and judicial capabilities by international law itself has the right to do so. And Israel has proven through the years, including from 2 years ago, that when it comes to soul search, when it comes to investigation, when it comes to judicial cases, when it comes to capabilities, Israel meets the highest standards in the world. And so I think on that question and in all these calls, I would say that if you look at the international law, Israel can and should be able to self-investigate itself.
And so now, after all that is done, what is the mechanism for restoring, full humanitarian aid and vital services in Gaza?
So right now, again, the peace agreement, if things go as it says in the peace agreement, the first difference is that all during these 2 years, if you look at the data, and I'm happy to share with you, trucks came from Israel to Gaza all along these 2 years with humanitarian aid, which a lot of it, if not majority, I don't know the percentage, was completely looted by Hamas. I think the difference now with this peace agreement that the aid will actually go to the people of Gaza and not to the leaders or the Hamas organization. I think by itself is a big change. Second thing, of course, there is a number of stated how many tons will go in, humanitarian, of course, health, infrastructure, reconstructing. It's all stated in the agreement, and it will have to be monitored, and it will have to be supervised. Because, people might be surprised, but we have the same goal. We want to see stabilized Gaza Strip or stabilized West Bank governed in a very normal way, not by terror organization, not by elements that calling to the destruction of the state of Israel, and prospering. And the biggest disillusion of October 7th. That was before that. That was our belief. We believed that Hamas will never do anything because they were prospering, because Israel was continuing. The crossing between Israel and the Gaza Strip was open. By the way, all through the 2 years, the only crossing that was open was the one with Israel. Even as we were fighting, we had soldiers that died in this crossing, making sure that the stream of assistance continues. And I think, besides certain points of the war that it was closed, the border was open. And again, people are very fast to forget it. But we need, again, to make sure that all this humanitarian assistance is going to humans, to the assistance, humanitarian assistance, and not, again, terror-supporting aid.
Move to the future now.
Yeah.
We can see the future yonder there coming. Trump administration has proposed a plan. And so how do you envision a transitional administration led by the Palestinian technocrats you talked about under the international supervision? How does Israel see the practical implementation of this plan?
To be honest, that's a very good question. I think this is the biggest question on the table. I will reiterate because I think this is the critical point. For that to happen, Hamas need to no longer exist as it is. And it's also said that those combatants, or whatever you want to call them, terrorists basically, who want to demilitarize and seek peaceful means can stay. Those who want to leave, they can leave. But that's the first element. We need, in order to move on to technocrat, we need to know that there is no longer these entities of distractions, and then you move forward. And how it's going to look, I think this is a very big question. Days will tell. I'm sure as we speak, President Trump is working. He's mentioned also Tony Blair as a partner. Tony's very active here as well. And there's many elements to it, and establishment. It's all said. It's in the peace agreement or in the agreement that was broke just a few days ago. But I think that it will have technocrat government with element, of course, of Arab states and international community. It will have also what's called the board of peace that will make sure that things are moving in the right direction. It will have to give guarantees to Israel of demilitarized area, because again, this is the guarantees we need in order to make sure that we can maintain peaceful life in Israel. It has many elements in the agreement. It's also stated it's going to have what's called International Stability Force, the ISF, that will work with the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, to make sure that the war is not somehow comes back. There are many elements to it. It will involve many countries in the Middle East. But I think that is the technical part. But if you look at the non-technical part, is actually the more optimistic part. What doors it can open. And I think the doors it can open is to broader peace in the Middle East. If that happens and there is more stability and quiet, and there is international monitoring as well, then imagine the horizon of what other peace can be done in the Middle East itself, as we've seen in the Abraham Accord, to make it broader, to have more partners coming into this. That is where the biggest vision is, and I really believe that could happen.
Yeah, and as it stands, Gaza is in ruins, and the Trump administration also, proposes a large-scale reconstruction efforts that would require a lot of investments. What role does Israel envision playing in this?
Eventually, again, if it's very important to say again this, the people of Gaza, the people of Israel, and it's also including in this peace agreement, the people are just people, and they deserve normal governance too. I'm a great believer, that if you have normal governance non-militarized, that is seeking to improve the livelihood of the people, that hasn't happened in the 20 years since Hamas is there, then you will see much more opportunities also with Israel. And I think what President Trump is aiming is really to bring a lot of investment, to make it a much more self-sustaining entity, which is, by the way, what Israel also believed in. If you look again before October 7, the number of permits of employees, we had the highest number of Gazans that worked in Israel. The number of trucks that came into Gaza. Look at October 7, and I can give you the statistics. The vision of building an island offshore of Gaza, that was part of, we were part of it. Hamas was given cash, it was given money, for crying out loud. So the vision of actually prospering Gaza is not new.
Madam Ambassador, there is also a proposal to make Gaza a terror-free zone. How do you think the international community can help you achieve that?
That was President Trump's vision a few months ago when he was elected second term. I think he started talking about it. And the idea, and I think this is, look, he is much smarter than me when it comes to dealing with this international economic affairs, but his vision is really I believe he wants to draw investors in by creating jobs and creating what's called safe investment. And if you think about it again, and that pertains to the question about de-radicalization, and if Gaza really goes into being self-governed, self-reliable, not radical entity, that in terms of prospect of investment, that should be something that could work well in the theory, because the location around the Mediterranean Ocean, vicinity to other countries in the Middle East, if they actually invest in the human capital and not in weapons, that could be a ladder for investors to come in, because there's always a new search of new areas that investors can come in.
Yeah. And another proposal that has really got people talking is the two-state solution. Prime Minister Netanyahu has previously affirmed his position on the Palestinian statehood. Where does Israel currently stand on the future of this Palestinian statehood, considering the current realities?
It's a topic that, of course, has been going with us for decades. And if you look at what the Prime Minister had said before, and reiterated it again, there's few conditions before we even go into discussions about future Palestinian states that they need to be met. And of course, the Trump administration is aware of it since his first Trump administration. And the first one, and is also mentioned here, by the way, in the 20 points agreement, the PA must stop encourage terrorists by doing few things. The first one, today, if you're a terrorist, the PA is the authority. It's kind of gives you a bonus to your family of paying you a certain amount of money if someone committed a terror attack and died. Then they compensate the family. And one of the things is part of also legislation, American legislation, not only Israeli legislation. There's a legislation that talks about that the PA must do a few things. So the first one we talked about, stop compensating terror, because what you do is you encourage it. So stop encouraging terror, stop compensating family, stop having material about killing Jews and Israelis in school books. I think the first conditions that they need to meet is that we need to stop dealing with entities that encourage, or not stop dealing, or change the way entities deal with their approach to terror. Because for too long, terror was encouraged by the entities themselves. So I think that are the conditions that need to be met.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. And over the last couple of weeks, we have also seen many nations, especially European nations, there's a shift in how European nations are starting to support the Palestinian state. How does your government view this?
My government stated many times that we trust the Trump moves and that Israel supports the U.S. and that its endeavors and adheres to the endeavors of the U.S. I think, of course, no one blocks any country from attempting any peace talks, negotiations. It's been going on for many years. I think there's a lot of faith, not only by the government of Israel, but also by the greater population. If you've noticed, Trump has just landed in Israel this morning, and Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and Witkoff, they're all there already. If you can see with how much support they're being greeted and how much appreciation, you will understand that the general population in Israel, the government, we follow the US track. They got, the history shows that US had a very good, solid track of peace building measurements. And I think there is a lot of faith in this avenue.
Does the recognition of the Palestinian state by the nations we know, affect your relations with them?
Look, eventually, like I keep saying it, if states, I don't think it's conducive to the peace process, because in order to have a real, not just political, internal process by countries, if you really, really want to have a peace agreement that is, and durable and real and honest, you need both sides to take measurements. And if you recognize one-sidedly without demanding anything from the Palestinian Authority, you're not building peace. Maybe you're just pushing it away. You need to have sincere process. When you have demands from both sides, and the basic demand, you need to govern. And if you handle state is fine, but it means de facto, that you haven't solved the issues. And meaning governing is, again, neglecting terror, stop investing in it, come both sides, come clean-handed to the process. And those countries are doing it, and again, for me, I think it's much more political than contributing to any real process on the ground.
Yeah. And moving closer home now, Africa, Rwanda, Israel and Rwanda have strengthened their ties over the recent years. How has the 2-year conflict and the recent peace deal influencing Israel's relationships with African nations and, of course, Rwanda particularly?
So you said it, and I think it's right. Rwanda has proven to be a good friend of Israel. Through 2 years, ties continue to strengthen. And I think, by and large, I don't think the war has affected the relations. On the contrary, we continue. This is my job here, to continue building it piece by piece. I think, but generally, the peace deals are good, generally, and that bring up opportunities. And look at the peace deal that is just happening here. It comes with a big opportunity on the economic front of investment. And I think that's what His Excellency Paul Kagame said many times in the past, that if there's an honest peace deal, that will bring investment. And I think the way it's going to, again, affect our country's relations, maybe we'll see even more investment from both sides. But again, peace generally is a good thing. It's a positive thing. It's an opening door for future opportunities. But I'm happy to say that, I consider, not me only, of course, my government considers Rwanda to be a very dear friend, and that the relations have continued and not severed in these 2 years.
Yeah. And talking about that, there are also growing voices from African nations who are starting to criticize. Before this peace deal that we are looking at, some African nations have come out clear to criticize Israel over its conduct in Gaza. Does that affect in any way the relationship between Israel and the African nations?
So we've seen that, and obviously they are much more loud than other voices in Africa that we've seen in these 2 years that actually came out supporting Israel more than before. But you never hear the positive. There's always the negative. We actually discovered or rediscovered or reinforced friends that we've had before, and they've come out to be good friends of Israel. To be honest, we've had a lot of visits from African countries to Israel in the 2 years, including to the southern part of Israel and the border and the kibbutzim next to the border. So actually, we felt, of course, also this, but we felt this. And those who are criticizing, I think some of them have their own interests and their own set of decisions, why they do what they do. I believe, again, that these things are also transactional, that Africa will, and as always, and will remain a very important friend of Israel. And I don't know if you've noticed, but also Israel has changed dramatically in the last couple of years, the focus and the attention towards Africa. There are many more visits of the foreign minister. He's not coming because he's not liked. He's coming because we have many friends in this continent. And a lot of them have proven to be very good supporters of Israel, also in the UN. So I would say, by and large, the picture is much more mixed. And I want to believe that in the future, we'll see again more opportunities and more positive trend also in Africa.
Okay, so before we even got to this peace deal that we are talking about, some of the African nations that have been voicing their concerns about the conflict, they talked about the risks of the conflict, extending to Hezbollah, Lebanon, or Iran. So what is Israel doing to ensure that this situation doesn't escalate to all these nations that I've mentioned?
There are two different questions here. First, a lot of these countries that are concerned about Israel somehow are less concerned about Pan-African issues, which makes me think that they're not doing it clean-handed. A lot of these countries have their own agenda. And I will not go here deep into details, but I think some of them, some of the agenda is not necessarily the benefit of the Middle East. It could be different agendas. But I think, by and large, the situation in the Middle East is, of course, not escalating now. It's de-escalating. That's the trend. What happened with Hezbollah was, by and large, understood by the international community. And again, to understand that and the situation with Hezbollah at the moment, all you need to see that in the latest war with Iran, Lebanon did not participate because there are voices, moderate voices in Lebanon, that do not want to see Hezbollah, an organization, taking over again. So I think there is actually, I would say it differently, Africa is a good friend of Israel, has always been. By and large, there is understanding of the situation in the Middle East. There are some voices, again, as I told you, I'm not going into their own interest here, that have their own interest, that calling for this, but by and large, the trend right now is to de-escalate. If they are very concerned about what's going on in the Middle East, they should tell Iran to stop supporting terror, although, by the way, also in Africa. So I would say that if there is a real concern, and not a cynical one, that you don't go to Israel and blame it for self-defending itself against missiles that can wipe out the whole country, but going to the source of the problem, which is Iran, and tell them to stop militarize the Middle East and Africa, by the way.
Yeah, okay. So I would want to end this interview with where we started, how the conflict started. It's been 2 years now. So how has that day, October 7th of 2023, shaped on how Israel security strategy and national outlook?
I think, first of all, it has changed Israel forever. It's a collective trauma that we have not even started to understand. It's collective. It's a country that's been in war for 2 years. And we bereaved many, many young people in this war. And people, you talk about kids and women were the front line of getting missiles indiscriminately from Hamas that were shot into their homes and were not killed because we have good defense system, because we invested in this defense system and not in tunnels. But we were targeted for 2 years. And I think it's very traumatic and it's going to reshape. However, this war has also shown the solidarity in Israel. If you see again, 500,000 people went out to celebrate this agreement, and you see the beautiful face of Israel where people were really helping each other all these 2 years. And there is also a glimpse of hope here, because if things go really as planned, we might, if really terror is being abandoned completely, and if those who proliferate terror are being actually held accountable, then you will really see a different Middle East. And that's where I think, again, that next to the trauma, like Rwanda knows so well, from trauma, good things can come. And many times I say Rwanda and Israel are bonded forever, 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 because you know what trauma is, but you also know you cannot relinquish your self-defense and self-security. And I think the same goes to Israel. We will never be able to abandon our security, because fairy tales don't just happen. You have to make them happen. You have to secure yourself. But if there's a real effort and real international, not cynical, but demand for truth in the Middle East, we might see a different positive future for this area.
Amid all this, what would your government describe as its successes in the Middle East?
There are many successes in this war. The first one, of course, is weakening Hamas, which was the condition that led to this agreement. Not only weakening, destroying its a lot of cases capabilities. The second thing I would say is the very big harm that another organization, Hezbollah, got from this, and its delegitimization in its own country. The third one is, of course, I would say, weakening Iran during the operation in June. But I would say no less than that would be that all this along these 2 years, when Israel was suffering from criticism, global criticism, unfair, unjust, it's fair to, by the way, to criticize. But the question is how you and what do you say? We're not immune from criticism. But all these 2 years, the countries we signed peace with during the Abraham Accord, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and other countries, have not stopped the relations with Israel. They've not seized the agreement. They have not reverted back to what was before. And we kept the peace agreement along these 2 years. Actually, Israelis flew all this time to Abu Dhabi, and people from there came to Israel. And I think that's a huge achievement, because what does it show? That if you have good foundation for peace, if you have people-to-people ties, if you stop talking about terror and investing in economy and mutual investment and money, then things actually, the foundations are very strong. And that gives me hope to the continuation of this trend with other countries.
Yeah. So, Madam Ambassador, as we come to the conclusion of this interview, and as you said, global perception about Israel across the world remains divided. If you come here in Africa, some youth no longer see Israel the same way. They think its force has been a bit disproportionate in Gaza. What is your government doing to improve its communication and its stance to make it more clear?
First, is a very valid point, and there's always a room to improvement in this aspect. I think it's a social media era, and there's so much, as we call it, fake news going on. It's very impossible always to combat it. There are many entities in the world that really distributed a lot of false information, and with a very declared agenda behind them. Some of them are sponsored, some of them have their own agenda. And I think instead of the discourse going around disproportionality, a lot of them have come to the point of Israel should not be existed, or Israel doesn't have a right for self-defense. And I think that it really veered from the legitimate discourse to a very brutal discourse. There were victims that were, we saw in the US and other places that were victims of this discourse in social media. I think what we've tried to do, and hopefully now things will come to a different future or change, is that we have tried all the time to come up with data and to come up with influencers that can, say what's really going on. But it's the social media is an open vessel with you cannot control everything, and when you try to shape, there was a lot, shape the mindset. There were a lot of money going on there to really show Israel not in the right way and not in a legitimate or fair way. So we tried the best we could do. There's always room to improve, going through social media, talking with youth, but also my job here. I show Israel. I don't talk about necessarily the conflict. I see what Israel can do, what we can do for the continent on agriculture, where we can be of assets. What can we do together? This is our job here, not necessarily talking about one angle of Israel. And again, as Rwanda, you're much more than an angle of conflict. You're a country that is pushing the continent forward with huge achievements. Israel is a miracle. We fought. The amount of missiles that landed at us would kill any other country. But with technology, we've managed to stop, to continue our lives. There's so much more we can bring to the international community. Agriculture, food was not scarce all these 2 years because due to technology. This is things that we can bring to Africa. So sometimes when I talk with youth, or see youth, or I talk with people, I say, one of the problems that you look at Israel from this angle, but we are much more. We're a country that basically thrive to exist. And we do whatever it takes to protect ourselves. We might discuss about proportionality, which is a legitimate discussion, but it's not legitimate to erase Israel from the map. And Israel can be a huge asset to the continent. Now, from now on, let's look forward. What kind of peace can be brokered in the Middle East? What else can be done there? How can we work together with other countries in the Middle East, together in Africa, which we have few initiatives to take Israel and other countries, do things here. This is where we're aiming, and I think hopefully again we can influence more the general opinion.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, once again for creating time to talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And to our audience, we thank you for creating time to watch us. We hope you found this conversation insightful. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.